Mercedes F1 has terrible news for Singapore Grand Prix. So we're going to be going through that in today's video, but before we get into it, make sure you like this video. And don't forget, if you want more Mercedes F1 content like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit that red button down below. Now, Mercedes is experiencing a disappointing season in Formula 1. Although the German racing stable has proved capable of contending for both world titles every season since 2014, it is in third place in the Constructors' Championship 6 races before the end in 2022. It faces Ferrari by a small distance, but Gary Anderson does not know whether it is wise to overtake them. The former Jordan F1 technical director openly wonders at the race whether it would be wise for Mercedes to take the loss, whereas it would be more financially attractive for Toto Wolff's team to be one place higher. Anderson says he needs to take a longer look longer term. While Mercedes isn't far behind Ferrari in the battle for second in the Constructors' Championship, perhaps the real prize is finishing third and getting that bit extra wind tunnel and CFD time. For years, Mercedes was known as a team that managed to perform consistently with a reliable car. Anderson finds it remarkable that with the current team, which is still made up of good people, the formation fails to compete at the front. I suppose that just proves that we have all known for years, car performance is critical. So I think this is really important to go through. As you all know, with everything that is going on, Mercedes definitely had a chance to win last season. Obviously, there is a lot of controversy, so we're not going to get into that in today's video. But to see them drop down this, far a little bit just under Ferrari is really hard to see. I really do think they could have definitely, if they sold out porpoising very early on in the season, they definitely could have been second as of right now. But things happen, and I guess you just have to continue to move forward. So it was hard to see, but obviously that's just the way this sport works. Now, Mercedes hope to compete for the world title again this year after last season's title battle with Max Verstappen like we talked about, but the German racing stable has failed to do so. With the new regulations, Toto Wolff's team could not manage to stay at the top, forcing it to take a step back. However, Andrew Chauvelin is confident that Mercedes will soon be able to improve, he told Motorsport Week. At the beginning of the season, Mercedes suffered a lot of porpoising, which was detriment to the car's performance. It also fell short in other ways. It has been a very interesting journey. I think we were overly optimistic and where we thought we could run the car, Chauvelin commented. Especially when it comes to the Singapore Grand Prix, it will be interesting to see if we can pull one off, as there is still a lot of problems to be seen. So that's what Chauvelin had to say, and it was very tough to hear that. I really do think that the Singapore Grand Prix was definitely Mercedes' best chance to actually, win a race, especially for someone like Lewis Hamilton, who has a long streak going. However, the Mercedes top men saw how Lewis Hamilton and George Russell often managed to take full advantage of Red Bull Racing and Ferrari's mistakes. It resulted in the British driver often managing to reach the podium and Mercedes bringing in a lot of points. As a result, Mercedes is still in a position right now to fight with Ferrari for second place in the Constructors' Championship. Now, Mercedes continues to develop the car. Just because after the summer break, the race weekends in Belgium, the Netherlands, and also in Italy were scheduled, according to Chauvelin, Mercedes learned important things there. The learning that we took does go in an indication of where we need to develop the car in the future. We were very overly optimistic this season, and it didn't work into our favor. So Andrew Chauvelin has a lot to say. Obviously, him being actual person for the team of Mercedes, it is hard to hear these things, but I do think when it comes to what's coming up for Mercedes, they can definitely turn it around. I know with the title of this video, you may be thinking I'm hating on Mercedes, but at the end of the day, guys, I am a Mercedes fan and I do want the best for them, but when it happens like this, guys, it is hard to see. Now, what I also did want to talk about is the actual move for Ricciardo, because it is getting more and more closer to the day that Ricciardo will announce what his next move is moving forward. Now, a month on from McLaren's bombshell announcement that Daniel Ricciardo will be dropped at the end of 2022 Formula 1 despite having a contract for 2023, the 8-time Grand Prix winner is still without a job for next year. He's not a front runner for any of the 4 remaining gaps on the grid, 2 of them at teams he started for their older cruisers. Now, a man who won for Red Bull Racing was never likely to return to what's now AlphaTauri at this end of his career, but Ricciardo did seem a logical target for Alpine, once it's clear it's intended. Fernando Alonso's replacement Oscar Piastri was actually usurping Ricciardo from McLaren, but given he has spent 2 years on a $25 million per year pay packet with what was in Renault in 2019 and 20, but opted to join McLaren, the decision appears to be one of never go back on Alpine's side. That leaves William or Haas, with the latter understood to be keen on either Ricciardo or Nico Hülkenberg, coming into a place that to replace actual Mick Schumacher if he decides against giving him a third year. But a Haas deal would be dependent on Ricciardo being willing to move on to a team that has never won a Grand Prix and relies on its technical partnership with Ferrari for its ability to field cars. Such as a move seems unlikely right now. It's remarkable that a driver of Ricciardo's reputation and standing should have a few possible options, and realistically only with teams in the bottom 3 of the championship. But that's the situation he faces. So the idea that he might reject an offer of a race drive without Haas or actually Williams, if either were forthcoming, is not so absurd. One thing Ricciardo does not need to be concerned about is the financial side. McLaren never disputed the fact that he had a contract for 2023, so we will have to be agreed to pay him handsomely for not driving one of its cars next year. We don't know the exact terms of Ricciardo's payout, but will be substantial, and McLaren CEO Zak Brown has already made it clear that his team will not stand in the way of Ricciardo racing elsewhere in F1 or any other series next year. Ricciardo's attitude is not one of any port in a storm, with a desire to stay on the F1 grid at all costs. Instead, it's all about taking the best option, hence why he could be willing to do the contents of a non-racing role. It's hard to imagine a driver who has been an F1 star for the past decade being willing to sit on the sidelines, and it's unlikely Ricciardo would see himself doing that. Unless that is with the team that might just offer him a pathway back to the front of the F1 grid. So who better than Mercedes, the preeminent F1 team of the past decade? Ricciardo had one thing abundantly clear: he wants to race on F1. The 33-year-old insists that he still loves Grand Prix racing and ideally wants to have a race seat for 2023, but he's also willing to sacrifice next year if necessary. The truth is, I'm keeping every option open, not only for next year, but for the future. I still don't know what next year looks like. I do want to race. Although this has been a challenging time in my career, it hasn't taken the love from the sport away from me, and that desire is still here to compete. That obviously many talks or thoughts about next year and beyond that, so I think that's honestly huge to hear. Now that includes the possibility of taking sabbatical from F1 with a view to return in 2024 or even a reserve driver role. Indeed, when Ricciardo said he was keeping every option open, it was in response to a direct question about the possibility of being Mercedes reserve, even though Lewis Hamilton has made it clear. He thinks Ricciardo is far too talented for that role and deserves to be on the grid instead. Pushing to Mercedes reserve would be all the long game, perhaps bolstered by a desire to see him behind the scenes of the team that he's been beaten by constantly throughout his F1 career. It would keep him sharp with the opportunity to take part of tire tests and drive the simulator regularly, and there's always the chance that he couldn't be needed to stand in for one or the regular Mercedes drivers should they be unavailable. The Singapore Grand Prix is just around the corner, guys. It is coming up this weekend, so it's going to be an exciting time for all of us. So thank you so much for watching, guys, and yeah, I'll see you soon. Peace.